Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today I would like to discuss with you going stealth, for those of you who have gone stealth, for those of you who plan to go stealth, what that means, and the anxieties that you may experience and why you may experience anxiety as a result of living stealth. Now, before I say that, I'm going to acknowledge that living stealth is an absolute option for a lot of people. It is something that you have to choose for yourself. I know there's a lot of people who are against transgender people living stealth because they really want transgender people to be open and advocating and being very transparent about their transgender history, and they consider that living stealth perhaps is further perpetuating binaries. There's always going to be somebody who thinks or has an opinion on a lot of elements of transgender phenomena, a lot of elements on transgender identity, a lot of elements on everything in life. It is really up for you, it's really up for me too, it's really up for any of us to decide with anything in our lives what feels right to us, what feels appropriate to us, what feels what really feels genuine to us, and only you can be judge of what truly is genuine for you. So I just want to express it and to acknowledge that for those who decide to live stealth, that is a valid option, that is a valid choice. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So what is living stealth for adults? Well, living stealth is really kind of a term to describe transgender identified individuals who have achieved a level of passing of the genders that they identify with, where they're pretty much navigating social strata of culture, social strata of the context in which they're living, without having to disclose their transgender history, without having to disclose that they're transgender. In other words, these are individuals who pass within the social constraints or social parameters of particular gender types, and as a result, they don't really have to disclose or don't feel like they even need to disclose that they have any transgender history. Now, living stealth, like I said, is an option. And a lot of people, maybe some of you who are watching who are now post-transition and are living stealth, have also realized that with that social integration, there's also an element of anxiety that tends to creep up. In fact, some people emailed me and asked me why is it that now they're living stealth and they thought that life actually should be easier. They thought that navigating the social elements of just living in communities should get easier, but in fact it's gotten harder. A lot of times we think that living in this mid-transition phase, right, when you're going through gender transition and you're not exactly yet passing, if possibility matters to you, again, very subjective, very personal. So when I throw those terms around, I don't mean that people have to strive for passability, but if that's something that matters to you, that's something that matters to you. So when you're living in that mid-transition phase and you're not really passing matters to you, but you're not really yet passing as the genders that you identify with, it can feel like this is the most difficult thing. And a lot of times you may think that once you achieve that level of passability, all of your problems are going to go away and it's going to be so much easier to navigate. And what a lot of people are finding out, what a lot of adults are finding out, is that once they have completed their gender transition, not all, but some, once they decide to live their life stealth, there's an element of anxiety that suddenly creeps up and suddenly makes their life challenging to live with. Now, why is that? Why is it that anxiety has to creep up at the moment when you actually have achieved the congruency of your gender? You would think that once you achieve that congruency, the anxiety should go away, right? It's similar to, I always make that analogy, probably should find another analogy by this time, but with a weight loss, right? Let's say you wanted to shed 40, 50 pounds and you finally shed those pounds. Well, you're probably going to feel confident and great. You're not going to feel the feeling of anxiety of navigating your life as a smaller framed individual, unless of course the anxiety is going to be the fear of gaining the weight back. But for people who are living stealth, the fear is not that suddenly you're going to regress and suddenly going to lose all the elements that you have achieved in terms of your gender congruency. It's a different sort of anxiety that I tend to see. Not everybody, like I said, who decides to live stealth experiences anxiety. But those of you who do, some of the reasons that you may experience of anxiety, I would like to explore in this video. So here's the thing. One of the primary reasons, I'm sorry, I have like a fly. One of the primary reasons why some of you may be experiencing anxiety, one of the primary and the biggest reasons living stealth is because internally you're still struggling to accept your transgender identity. There's a difference between deciding not to disclose your transgender history, and there's a difference between actually accepting that you do have transgender history. You can't just go through transition period. You can't just go through transition process, especially if you've gone through medical and surgical transition, through all of those challenges that you had to overcome, and suddenly be on this side and to start telling yourself that you are the genders that you now identify with without acknowledging that element of your history. Again, you don't have to share that element of history with anybody, but you have to accept it within yourself that you are a person of transgender experience. In the very least, in the very most, to acknowledge that you are a transgender person. And that can be challenging. So when you're not acknowledging that, when perhaps you're telling yourself, and a lot of times, living stealth, we see with trans-binary people, right? We see that with people who were assigned male at birth but identify as female, or assigned female at birth but identified with male identity. Because socially, culturally, if you're going to pass, non-binary identity is still struggling to achieve a level of possibility because there's no social cue markers, but we're still having by far and large the non-binary gender expressions that are within the scope of passing. So it's when people tell themselves that they were never assigned male at birth, where they negate the biology, the biological aspects of themselves, and when they tell themselves that they are women. Now, I have no problem with transgender women calling themselves women, absolutely not. We're all getting close in terminology here. But the point is, when you actually negate some of the biological aspects of your birth, some of the fact that you were born with a particular chromosomal alignment, and as a result you had the secondary sex characteristics that you go through transitionary period in order to change. When we negate that, we're lacking that inner acceptance. When we're lacking that inner acceptance, and now we're living stealth, that is going to bring up anxiety because your subconsciousness has not achieved a level of congruency. Think about it this way. Think about it as now you have achieved the physical congruency, right? But psychologically, you have not yet achieved that level of congruency because you're still not accepting that you have transgender history yourself. As a result, there's going to be tension on internal plane, on subconsciousness without you even realizing it, and that's going to cause anxiety. Your anxiety is going to manifest as a person living stealth in very different ways. One of the ways your anxiety is going to manifest is when you're going to be in a group of cis-identified people. And because you, deep down, know that you have transgender history but are struggling to accept it without even realizing it, you're going to feel anxious because subconsciously you're going to start comparing yourself to those cis people. On top of that, what a lot of times happens for people is that you're going to become hyper vigilant, a little bit hyper focused, because subconsciously you're going to fear that they're going to find out about your transgender history. We don't tend to fear that somebody's going to find something about us that we have accepted ourselves. Let me repeat it. We don't fear when somebody's going to find out something about us when we have already accepted it. We fear when somebody's going to find out parts about ourselves that we have not accepted, that we have negated, that we have disavowed. So when you do that, that's when anxiety is going to creep up. And as a result, you're going to feel as if they're going to somehow find out about your transgender history. And then all of these things and thoughts come that you had that, oh my God, they're going to think I'm fraud. They're going to think that I'm faking it. They're going to think that I'm imposter. Whatever it is you may be thinking in your head. Maybe you're not even there yet. You're not thinking any of those things, but you're starting to feel that element of anxiety. Think about, well, that's probably a different analogy for a different video. For now, I just want you to realize that one of the primary and biggest reasons for anybody who's living and choosing to live styles, which is again, nothing wrong with that. And if you're feeling a lot of anxiety socially and you're wondering, why is it now that I am in my authentic gender and I'm navigating life and I should feel at peace with myself and I should feel the psychological congruency alongside with my physical congruency. Why? On the other side, I'm actually feeling a lot of anxiety. It is because you yourself are struggling to accept your transgender history. And you may not even be aware of it. You may feel and think that you have accepted your transgender history. After all, you have gone through it. After all, you didn't just sleepwalk through transition process. After all, you've been there for all of your surgeries. After all, you've been there through coming out phase and dealing with stigma and dealing through the mid-transition period. You've been through it. Going through the process of gender transition is very different than integrating internally what is happening to you on a psychological plane. Very, very different things. You can go through something without actually realizing and assimilating the effect of that which you have gone through. So if you're watching this and you are living styles and you're having anxiety, and you're wondering why, ask yourself whether you have truly accepted your transgender history yourself. Again, accepting you have transgender history is different than deciding to share it. People can accept they are transgender and they have that history and choose not to express it, right? Two different things. And if you are planning on, as you go through transition, you are planning on living styles, just be mindful that you need to also work on integrating, you need to work on assimilating the process of transition. Transition is a difficult process. It's a process that shifts and turns upside down a lot of things inside of you internally. And as a result, you really need to assimilate it. Not to mention, transition is traumatic. Whether it has been challenging for you in terms of trauma in the sense of a lot of people leaving you or people you living in an environment that was very stigma-driven, or whether it was less trauma-driven, nonetheless, there's still going to be trauma without you even, whether you realize it or not, it is traumatic. So comment below, let me know, have you experienced anxiety as a result of going styles? And where do you think your anxiety was coming from? What do you think was behind that anxiety? What do you think was responsible for that anxiety? If you are transitioning right now, how are you planning on integrating and assimilating this process of your transgender history? How many of you think that you need to accept that you have a transgender history? I'd be curious to hear how many of you think that once you transition, you are a man, a woman, but you think it's okay to completely negate the process you've been through. Comment below, share, and share with me what you think, what your thoughts are, what your experiences have been, and I will see you all next time. Bye.